For years, a hidden rivalry has lingered within the British royal family between Queen Camilla and Princess Catherine. On the surface, the two women appear poised, polished, and perfectly cordial. But behind the cold walls of the palace, tensions have been quietly mounting. Camilla, once the center of storms and scandals, now faces the painful reality that Catherine is steadily winning the hearts of the public. It is not only her elegance that captivates the nation, but also her image as a devoted mother and a modern emblem of the monarchy. To many, Catherine is a living reminder of Princess Diana, a timeless figure whose legacy is forever etched into the hearts of millions. And this, more than anything, is what Camilla cannot bear. Her simmering jealousy has gradually turned into subtle clashes, from icy stares and veiled remarks to carefully concealed confrontations within the palace. Each moment has carried an undercurrent of rivalry. All it needed was the right spark to explode into the open. That spark finally came when Camilla confronted Catherine directly in a shocking encounter that left Buckingham Palace in turmoil. This was no simple clash of personalities. It was a silent declaration of war, a struggle for influence, and a battle for the public's loyalty. The breaking point came when King Charles, who had always tried to maintain a fragile balance, finally lost control. His fury spilled into the open, revealing cracks deep within the royal household. And with that moment of raw emotion, a troubling question emerged. Could this confrontation mark the beginning of a new power struggle at the very heart of Buckingham Palace? When the event occurred, the palace sparkled with the calm expectation of a ceremonial meeting. The stateroom's magnificent chandeliers were polished until each crystal reflected light like a constellation. Fresh flowers adorned the halls, their gentle perfume blending with the mild, clean scent of beeswax from the evening candles. Staff moved swiftly and gracefully, their shoes muted by thick velvet carpeting, their words a respectful whisper. It seemed to be a perfect institution, ready for another immaculate performance. The polished surface hid an uncomfortable current, like a river moving restlessly under ice. The Princess of Wales was among the first to notice. Catherine's high emotional intelligence and awareness of others alerted her to what was left unsaid. The hall attendants who passed her saw it. Their movements, bows, and fleeting grins were perfect, yet their faces were tense. Their gazes flickered uneasily, as if each held a weighty secret. She stopped to ask a young housemaid whether the evening reception was ready. The young lady, alarmed, hurriedly assured her that everything was okay, speaking too hastily. She curtsied and said, "Everything is perfectly on schedule, Your Royal Highness," and left. Catherine remained uneasy as the maid hurried down the hallway. The guarantee was hollow, a scripted remark given under strain. The tension grew throughout the day. She heard whispered discussions from service pantries and alcoves. When she arrived, words stopped, leaving just an incomplete sentence. She heard a group of footmen chuckle, then a stiff stillness as she turned a corner. She tried to dismiss it as palace gossip, the constant, inconsequential conversation that has always sustained a vast and intricate home. But this felt different. Whispers gained weight and sharpness. They seemed deliberate, like hushed warnings. Still, Catherine ignored the intrusions. She had grown accustomed to continuous surveillance and muffled tongues. Her position required a calm, graceful public persona without obvious worry. So she focused on that responsibility. In the halls that would soon be crowded with dignitaries, she smiled as expected and maintained poise. She meticulously prepared, praised the floral staff, and monitored the minute details. In her tranquil heart, she felt something invisible growing closer, as if the castle were holding its breath. The workers continued preparations, but the mood shifted every hour. The air was dense with anxiety unrelated to the event. Even the ancient walls, quiet witnesses to centuries of royal drama, appeared to be listening, holding on to secrets that could not last long. Catherine adjusted her sapphire blue gown in her dressing room mirror, telling herself she was probably imagining it and that the murmurs were merely over-attentive staff gossip. However, her years of experience navigating royal life's hidden conventions taught her better. The scene was set for elegance and order, but also something more. Beneath the sparkling chandeliers and starched perfection of the liveried personnel was a crack, an unseen but very real fault line waiting for pressure to build. Catherine had no idea how near it was to breaking or how intense the shaking would be. The palace knew, the walls knew, everyone soon would. The public split. The top staff met in the Red Room for a final briefing before the state event. The long mahogany table was polished to a mirror-like shine, with briefing materials neatly stacked before each seat. The Princess of Wales sat at the head of the table, erect, listening closely, while the master of the household reviewed the itinerary. Around her, aides and department heads nodded politely, pencils poised, faces bland. The scenario was perfectly formal. However, Catherine's day-long stress was now a tangible hum in the room, an invisible electrical charge ready to erupt. The spark was Queen Camilla. She entered the room quickly, commanding attention. Even those familiar with her mood swings were unsettled by her strong, almost heavy strides on the old carpeting and her harsh look. She interrupted before the master of the household finished his speech or was acknowledged. Instead, she stared at Catherine, and the room fell into a deep, sickening quiet of terror and fascination. She began with stinging, passive-aggressive statements, seemingly doubting Catherine's approval of a minor seating arrangement alteration as an insult. Camilla asked, "One wonders, with innuendo, when certain traditions became so easily dispensable." Catherine kept her composure and replied rationally, her voice and words calm and courteous. "It was a small adjustment made for the comfort of our guests." "Camilla," she whispered, urging her to focus on their duties. Even the calm reaction appeared to enrage the queen. Her voice rose, abandoning its sarcasm and revealing a long, simmering resentment. "Your duty," Camilla replied louder. "Your duty seems to be to constantly position yourself to ensure you are the center of every photograph, every story." The remarks shattered the formal mood. The staff froze, watching the monarchy's two most powerful women. They were caught wondering whether to turn aside in reverence or witness this historic disintegration. No one moved. No one breathed. They all realized they were on the verge of an unforgettable event. The scene turned from a verbal attack into something unprecedented within the palace. As her wrath grew, Queen Camilla acted physically. She shoved Catherine's shoulder, pushing her back into her chair as Catherine rose slightly, perhaps to leave. "You will sit and listen," Camilla threatened. A collective piercing gasp sucked the room's breath, echoing shockingly against the damask walls. Catherine slumped back into her seat, her face a mask of deep astonishment. The weight of what happened seemed to break the air. There were no more whispered arguments in passageways. The same individuals sworn to defend the monarchy's image watched this public unmasking, a complete breakdown of racial etiquette in its most sacred venue. Staff couldn't move. Some pressed their lips into thin white lines, while others averted their gaze to the table, ashamed. Everyone had sworn allegiance pledges and was trained to carry the monarchy's secrets until death. But this was different. This was an unbearable secret. It was seen, it was heard, it was felt. Though her pulse pounded against her ribs, Catherine stayed quiet, her breath quickening, but her eyes unwavering. No harsh response came from her. She let the eerie quiet speak for her crew. Her dignity became her strongest defense in silence. Camilla, quivering with adrenaline and rage, turned her back as if she could not bear to see what she had done. The room was frozen between amazement and the cold realization that nothing would ever be the same. The palace shook when the fault line ruptured. As soon as King Charles entered the room, a profound hush seemed to surround him. He quickly scanned the room, accustomed to doing so swiftly. His top personnel looked startled and pale. He saw his wife rigidly defying him, her fury still hot. He spotted Catherine, her composure weakened by astonishment. He didn't grasp what had happened for a moment, but the room's poisonous energy told him everything. It was not orderly and respectfully quiet. It was disaster quiet. Something within the king cracked as Catherine's terrified eyes met his. He had spent decades, his entire existence as heir, preparing to be the calm, purposeful ruler in charge. The facade cracked as he saw his family implode in the midst of his court. When he spoke, it was not regal, sharp, rough, and loud. "What happened?" he demanded, his words breaking the silence more than Camilla's push. He didn't wait for an answer. He knew something horrible had happened, and it sparked an anger he could not control. Camilla tried to defend herself, still angry. "I was simply making a point that needed to be made," she said. But her remarks fueled the flames. Charles's rage erupted. The howl of a betrayed man replaced his steady monarchical voice. "A point?" he roared, turning on her. "You call this proving something in front of them?" He aggressively pointed at the embarrassed personnel. His harsh allegations questioned her judgment, self-control, and respect for the institution he now represented. His fury extended beyond his wife. He then focused his anger on Catherine, shocking everyone. His eyes, filled with rage and despair, stared at her. "And you," he tensely murmured, "why did you let this happen? Why didn't you?" He paused, unable to explain his harsh demand. He probably understood his questions were illogical. They flew like arrows without a target, seeking to hit anything to relieve the terrible strain within him. The staff was completely motionless, heads bent, hearts racing with horror beyond professional obligation. They witnessed the complete breakdown of royal command. They were trained to serve monarchs discreetly and protect the crown with dedication. But what they saw was unavoidable and violated every protocol they had learned. Charles, who generally takes his public appearances seriously, was yelling. His statements indicted everyone in the room for their silence, weakness, and failure to maintain the palace's delicate order. He even blamed himself, his voice cracking with emotion as he admitted that he had failed and caused discord in his home. "Will this be my reign?" he shouted, the question hanging like a death sentence. Each outburst weakened his authority. His gestures became erratic. His voice roared and then wavered, revealing his deep distress. The staff witnessed a broken man for the first time, not a sovereign. The generational weight, expectation of perfection, ghost of his mother's unshakable rule, and unending demands of image and duty clashed. The explosion rocked the room more than Camilla's action. Catherine remained silent. She kept her composure, but Charles envied and loathed her power. Camilla refused to surrender, staring at him defiantly. Between the mute princess and the stubborn queen, Charles felt the crown slip, if not physically. He merely lowered his voice at the conclusion of his outburst. But the harm was done. The king had lost his composure, and his court had seen it all. The staff left in a heavy, unsettling stillness once the awful meeting was mercifully over. Their normally quiet footfall boomed across the polished stone floors, sounding swift yet deliberate, as if they were fleeing the terrible weight of what they had just seen. None dared talk near the Red Room. Shock and fear had stifled their speech. From the relative safety of the service hallways and back tunnels, the whispering started. It began slowly like silk rustling, then spread like flames on dry tinder. The palace split into factions. Many defended the Princess of Wales. They spoke quietly, admiring her poise to show their commitment. She remained strong despite being verbally and physically harassed, they said, recognizing a future queen in her. These voices called her quiet, deep insight, not weakness. She showed the restraint of a true stateswoman. A top assistant told a colleague, "She understands that descending into the fray would have cheapened the crown." A smaller, more cautious faction supported Queen Camilla, but they were quieter and less confident. They said her outburst was caused by years of struggle and frustration, not malice. They described her protracted struggle for recognition and the various ways her status was questioned. Her remarks depicted her as a woman suddenly free from oppressive expectations, not an attacker. These defenders knew their viewpoint was risky, So they only expressed it in trusted corners and behind closed doors, never speaking out. The loudest and most concerned murmurs were neither Catherine's nor Camilla's. They belonged to the king. From top private secretaries to humble footmen, staff struggled with what they saw. A king losing control so completely. How could his fury explode in front of his colleagues without regard for consequences or image? They described his trembling voice, eyes of rage, and accusations against everyone. Instead of a monarch's calm, clear authority, they saw an overwhelmed man erupt. Some pitied him, thinking the crown, which he had waited a lifetime to wear, had finally broken him. A longtime butler whispered, "He's only human. The pressure would break anyone." Others feared him. They worried about his unpredictable temper affecting those close to the crown. The late Queen Elizabeth II's stoicism was their professional standard. This was its terrible reverse. The palace appeared to echo these murmurs. Though inert, the old stone walls seemed alive with voices flowing through them. Rumors spread over every hallway and antechamber. The servants avoided each other's sight, not out of indifference, but because they worried about what would be revealed in their eyes, whose side they were on, and what they believed. The air thickened, and the monarchy's great palace seemed like a dangerously divided house. By night, the voices were unmistakable. Small looks and exchanges showed loyalties. Secretly, allegiances had shifted. At the center was a crown, fully intact and shining beneath the lights, but trembling as if it sensed the instability pressing down on its ancient gold. The palace walls had harbored centuries of secrets, but seldom one so powerful and terrible. King Charles was shrouded in the afternoon's turmoil. Even though the Red Room was empty, his hands were on his temples as he sat in his father's and grandfather's study. He felt more oppressed by stillness than yelling. For the first time since becoming king, he felt exposed. The remaining sovereign was a man full of sorrow, reeling from his loss of control. His top advisors didn't barge in with allegations. They were quieter, stronger, and more destructive. It was delivered with controlled words and searing, dissatisfied looks. Keepers of the institution. These men and women protected the monarchy against all dangers, even the king. "Your Majesty," the oldest said coldly, "we have a situation of the gravest nature." They reminded Charles that monarchy was based on perception, not fact. They stated that authority came from the notion that the person wearing the crown was infallible or appeared to be. The mirage of stability collapsed as he raised his voice and vented his fury at his family and staff. Charles protested. He said he had been agitated beyond measure, that the strain was overwhelming, and that any man in his place would have snapped. "You didn't hear what happened," he demanded, raising his voice again before catching himself. But the advisors persisted. They told him he was no ordinary man. He was the king. A king couldn't afford apparent fury in front of servants. Not before witnesses who valued whispers. "A single outburst, sir," one remarked, "can unravel years of careful image building. It indicates losing control of one's temper and kingdom." He was hit harder by the statements than by family criticism. He had carried the crown long enough to appreciate its cost, but he realized he may have misjudged it. The crown was more than riches and jewels. It was the inhuman demand to be calm even while storms raged inside. Now that stability had broken, leaving him vulnerable to the judgment of his subjects and, more cruelly, his servants. Charles relived the scenario alone. His rage was reflected in the staff's terror. Catherine looked struck with astonishment. He observed Camilla's unwavering fire. Each picture was fresh torture. He wondered whether history would remember him as the ruler who failed to control himself, not his country, as the modernizer he wanted to be. That concept tormented him more than the encounter. Charles doubted his strength for the realm he inherited for the first time. His position seemed like a golden prison with shining but unbreakable bars. He wanted to be human, fallible, and able to fail without repercussions. Yet he knew he would never recapture such freedom. He wasn't king for his sentiments. The image portrayed to the world was now dangerously broken. Charles sensed something trembling beneath him in the stillness of the study. He was trapped by his counselor's dreadful reality. His influence was eroding inside his palace walls, not in parliaments or the press. For the first time, the crown that lay on his head seemed excessively heavy, almost as if it no longer belonged to him. Catherine left the room with the same elegance with which she entered, her feet firm even as her world spun. She was silent. She was undefended. Anger did not control her. Instead, she hid her embarrassment and suffering behind her impenetrable wall of calm, her public persona. The casual observer might have thought she was unharmed. In solitude, a deep wound burned. Her non-retaliation was calculated. She understood better than anyone that every emotion, gesture, and breath within the palace was scrutinized, examined, and recalled. Fighting back would have plunged her into the pandemonium she so desperately longed to escape. She chose dignity by remaining silent. She believed that quiet could speak louder than yelling and show strength that wrath could not. However, she understood palace silence is never neutral. Others depict their interpretations of it. Her restraint was much praised by staff. She stood firm through public humiliation. They muttered. She represented a monarch in waiting's patience and fortitude to them. She was admired for her gentleness, enduring others' abuse without resentment. She was their future, and her silence showed she was ready to carry its obligations. Others saw her silence differently. Some Camilla supporters perceived it as frailty. They thought her inaction showed a lack of courage. They mistook her serenity for reluctance in the palace's fierce power struggle. Her husband felt the full impact of her withdrawal. Prince William reacted with volcanic fury to the news. According to a source, his initial concern was for his wife. The unacceptable and disgraceful treatment she received from Camilla, and to his sorrow, his father, infuriated him. His rage at Charles was intense. William, who has worked hard to modernize, humanize, and stabilize the monarchy, regarded his father's reaction as reckless self-sabotage. He sees it as a betrayal of everything they are trying to build, the source said. For him, safeguarding his family is vital, and he thinks the king failed as a sovereign and father. When William and Catherine were alone, her stillness changed. A public strategy became a private shield. Charles considered her silence judgmental. William saw it as profound pain. He attempted to get her to talk about her emotions, but she resisted. Her silent presence in the hours that followed became a wall he struggled to break. In her quiet, he perceived a great distance. Not reproach, Catherine isolated herself in her family and private quarters to avoid the tumult. She finally dropped her pretense. She doubted her choice. Strength in silence had long been her shield. But a shield may become a prison if held up too long. In the quiet of her apartment, she knew that her great silence had implications. It influenced perception, sparked judgment, and erected invisible boundaries with her adversaries and loved ones. By not fighting, she safeguarded the monarchy's image and secluded herself within it, founded on centuries of secrets. The royal household has traditionally valued secrecy, but that day's events were too powerful and visceral to contain. The corridor murmurs of terror did not last. After a while, the news started to slip beyond the royal walls. It passed through a trusted confidant, a distressed lady-in-waiting telling her sister, a scared footman telling his roommate, and a senior advisor alerting a favorite journalist in a cryptic, off-the-record manner. Some truth, some hint. The story had taken off by the time it reached Fleet Street newsrooms. Initial reports cited unnamed sources and rumors of a serious rift, but the details, a heated exchange, an unprecedented confrontation, and a king whose temper had flared, made the tale official within days. It was a generation-defining royal crisis. Speculation abounded. Screaming tabloid headlines. Controversies surrounded 24-hour news networks. Fascinated and outraged, the public absorbed every detail. Battle lines were formed online. #Team Catherine trended globally as millions praised her grace under pressure. Camilla was defended by a small but vocal group as a victim of a system that never welcomed her. The worst storyline involved King Charles. The stable, rational king he had hoped to develop was replaced by a volatile, furious man incapable of leading his family or a country. Everyone wondered if the king could lose control so spectacularly. Could he rule? Inside the palace, pressure was high. Vague denials from advisors stoked conjecture as they tried to control the impact. Foreign dignitaries discreetly inquired. The Prime Minister's office was deeply concerned about risks to the UK's global standing. Charles, alone and besieged, felt the world's gaze. He realized that public trust, not stone walls, secured royalty, and that destroyed confidence was nearly impossible to rebuild. His forefathers' portraits seemed to accuse him as he wandered the palace at night. He wondered how many had failed to manage such violent storms. For the first time, he faced the horrifying thought that the monarchy for which he had spent his life might collapse if he failed to save it. The private chamber storm was no longer private. The issue resonated from power to Commonwealth streets as a national problem. Now, as he looks back on his journey, King Charles seems trapped in a whirlwind of contradictions. On one side stands the majestic shadow of Queen Elizabeth II, his mother, who embodied perfection, steadfastness, and unwavering devotion to the crown. On the other is Prince William, his son, whom he admits carries within him the decisiveness, strength, and image of a modern king for the future. Between these two seemingly flawless generations, Charles appears lost, neither as strong as his mother nor as fresh and resolute as his son. In such a situation, one might expect him to find solace in the wife he chose. Yet instead of being a source of comfort, Camilla has become the root of endless discord. She constantly sparks conflicts with Catherine, driving Prince William further away from his father. She is entangled in unending disputes with Princess Anne and has even shaken public confidence with her controversial actions. Rather than easing the king's burdens, Camilla has unwittingly turned the throne into a place more fraught with troubles than ever before. Charles is deeply troubled, for he knows that his time is not long. He longs to leave behind a worthy legacy, yet he is surrounded by family conflicts and growing divisions. In that solitude, one haunting question remains. Will history remember him as a king deserving of respect, or merely as a hesitant man overshadowed by the brilliance of his mother and his son? Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Behind the palace walls lie countless secrets, conflicts, and struggles that have never been fully told. We believe this journey of discovery not only helps you better understand the hidden corners of the British royal family, but also opens new perspectives on power, love, and legacy. If you found this content engaging, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next episodes. Your thoughts are invaluable, so please leave a comment below to join the discussion. Once again, thank you sincerely for staying with us. We'll see you in the next video, where more royal secrets await to be revealed.